Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strategic Crossroads, a podcast from the Middle East Center at the New Lines Institute. I'm your host, Zara. Each episode, we explore dynamics shaping the Middle East from political transitions to regional power dynamics. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work and personal journey has influenced how many understand Syria's long struggle for freedom, justice, and political transformation. Our guest is Yassin al-Haj Saleh, writer, political dissident, and one of the most compelling voices on Syria's political landscape. In this conversation, we'll discuss his personal experiences, the question of internal stability in Syria, foreign policy, sectarianism, Islamist movements, the risks of faith-based political models, and what the future of Syria looks like from where we stand today. Yassin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Zara, for having me.
So I'd like to kickstart this conversation, starting with your own personal journey, your own, your background, your experience on the ground in Syria. You were imprisoned in Tadmor prison for years at a very young age. And your experience there, I can imagine, has shaped much of your opinions and your thinking today regarding the Syrian state, authoritarianism, and Syrian society. So what about that experience has shaped your perspective on Syria's future?
Yeah, so first, just a necessary correction. I spent only the 16th year in Tadmor prison, fortunately, because it is man-eaters that took place. And I was taken there with other comrades after I finished my 15-year sentence that the Supreme State Security Court found it just to impose on me. So, as you see, it means that the regime didn't respect even its own justice. Well, my 16 years in jail were my formative experience. All my 20s, and more than half of my 30s were in jail, in 3 different prisons, in Aleppo, in Damascus, then in Tadmor. I was a medical student when I was arrested, a young member in a communist party opposing the regime, and I was released. I was 36. So I was able to learn from my comrades and later from books. Other than Tadmor, the last year, and the first year and a half, which was very difficult and bad. It started with torture and traumatizing experience. The conditions were negotiable. 13 years and a half, it was rather okay. Prison is always horrible, especially that if you take into consideration that I was taken to court only after 11 years and 4 months of being arrested. So 11 years and 4 months, there was no cause there. You may be released tomorrow or you may die in jail.
Right.
So, but I was able to learn a bit, and in a way I live from what I learned in jail. It is my formative experience in this meaning that it changed me. It changed me, hopefully, in a rather positive way. I became writer because I was in jail. So, yeah.
How do you think your views changed while you were in prison? Or did you develop a deeper understanding of Syrian society, what needs to change, what the core root of the issue is related to the instability that we're seeing today?
Yeah, so in 1980s, jail maybe was the real Syrian parliament. You would meet people from different social backgrounds and from different political parties that the regime that were critical to the Assad regime. So of course I learned from this because you meet hundreds of people there and you learn in direct or indirect way. You learn from them, and of course from books. And when you are 20 and then 25, 27, 30, you are learning and you are reading course, people become more mature. I learned about Syria, I guess, in jail more than I learned at any other time. And because you have much time in prison, you, in a way, your mind is not busy with 1,000 things like we live right now. With time, things take a rhythm. You feel that you are receiving the world or receiving this small world you live in, and the information you are getting from people or from books in a distilled form. So in a way it was emancipatory experience for me, indeed. Let's remember that 1980s, maybe prison, other than being a parliament, it was the most decent place in Syria, and you don't have to fake things or practice camouflage but it was also the time that the Soviet Union and the socialist bloc crumbled down, and I was a communist. But we were already critical to the Soviet Union, and we defend autonomy, and that we decide what's good and what's bad for us. We conceptualize and theorize about our country. So it was a changing and emancipatory experience for me, and I wouldn't say that it is because of jail that this emancipation took place. It is in spite of it. It is because I resisted it. I was able to resist. So it is, in a way, I am indebted to that experience. Yeah.
So it sounds like almost the experience, it exposed you to the reality of, you know, what you were facing.
And it pushed you to go deeper inside yourself, to broaden your internal world. So in a way, it is also a spiritual experience.
Yes, yeah. Super interesting. Thank you for sharing. It seems like for a very long time, for decades, maybe from the 80s, the 70s, since, you know, Assad came to power, Syrian society has been built around slogans of resistance and, you know, grassroots movements to try and make sure that the country, you know, stays a whole and united. But many argue that internal instability has weakened Syria's position as a whole. So what steps do you think a future, or the Syrian government, the transitional government today, should take to build genuine domestic stability? If you know, take away and you ignore, you know, foreign policy and Western allies, and you just focus on the Syrian people and what they need and what it's going to take to rebuild the country towards, you know, stability, something that maybe Syria has not experienced for a very long time. Is there a model that you have in mind, or perhaps a set of principles you believe could help restore legitimacy for the country and then, you know, peace and order for its people?
What weakened Syria's stability is that the country for long years was walking on one leg, or actually standing on one leg, because you cannot walk on one leg. And this leg was security. Syria was national security state, with one man deciding about everything important and one man thinking. And this man was not, I mean, even if he was genius, one man, a country of millions of people, needs so many to think and to decide and to have debate. And so this is what weakened Syria. It is not internal tensions. Our society is no different than other society of having internal tensions. Of course, when we talk about society of, in those days, 7 millions, 8 millions, 9 millions in 1980, then now 25 maybe. Of course, there will be tensions and problems and disagreements, and that's, politics is about this. We need politics because the interests of different social groups are different, quite different. And to avoid the clashes, we need political life, active political life. This is what is needed now. So it's not different now. If Syria is reduced again to one-man show, or to a country where one guy or a small clique of people thinking and deciding, it will weaken the country again, and we will not have, maybe the country will not survive, because Syria now is in a very bad shape. Not only weak, it's unstable, divided, and many foreign powers intervening. So we need to move forward by building inclusive political system where many people can think, act, and organize and cooperate. This is what was bad in the days of Hafez and Bashar al-Assad is still bad. You cannot reproduce the same, maybe just changing the hands or the heads and things will be solved. No, they will not be solved. What caused the problems in the past will cause problems now if you do it the same. If the only change is from a family and sectarian hands to another sectarian hands, this will keep the country weak and maybe it endangers its very survival.
Okay, I have two questions in follow-up to this. One is on the question of national unity and building state cohesion. Syria obviously has a very diverse ethnic makeup. You have the Kurds in the northeast, you have the Druze. Kurds, they speak a different language, they raise a different flag. Culturally, they're extremely different, and they do not identify as Arab. And since Shara came to power, there has been understandable fear that sectarian violence, Sunni rule will now lead to a situation where their rights and their distinct identities are not recognized constitutionally. From your perspective, you've lived in the country, you're from the country. Do you think that prioritizing decentralization and granting these minorities what they're asking for, which is some form of self-governance, will lead to stability? Or do you think that this will result in the ongoing tensions that we're seeing in the headlines today?
Well, Syria was over-centralized country and it should be less centralized, this is for sure. Not only for more just representation, other religious and ethnic groups, but also for economic reasons. It is again when the capital, Damascus, was controlling the whole country and weakening the initiative, the local initiative of people. The challenge is how to translate this into viable distribution of power for the benefit of governors, or for maybe Syria should be rethought of a different way. We have 13 or 14 governors and maybe we need more for people in different localities, towns, cities, villages, to have voice and to have a word in the decisions that affect their lives. So this is the Syrian debate right now, actually. The only problem, it is almost everybody agrees on non-central distribution of power. But there are disagreements if this should be based on geography or in ethnicity or confessional groups. I opt for basing it in geography. And again, maybe we need, instead of 13 or 14 governors, we need 30. Because we don't have, other than Sweden, we don't have an area that is not mixed. That, in Al Jazeera, for instance, where SDF dominates wide areas there, most of the population are Arabs. And there are other communities, Syrians, Armenians, Muslims and Christians. So again, I prefer localities or governors, more governors with more power. At the same time, actually, we need to empower the center. Syria is now weak as a center. By empowering the center, I mean to build legitimate and inclusive political system. Legitimacy is very important because the Syrian regime for more than 50 years lacked legitimacy and they resorted to violence to stay in power. This is the solution that should not be accepted in Syria from now on. And I believe that Syrians who for 14 years were struggling for their rights and for justice will not accept Assadism without Assad, or Sunni Assadism in place of Alawite Assadism. So yeah, it is a matter of reinventing Syria. It is not easy. It is easy to say it, but it is not easy to do it, apparently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of, what Syrians will accept and won't accept, a big question at the moment right now is whether Syria will normalize relations with Israel. Now, for several decades, Israel has occupied the Golan Heights. How do you view the debate around Israel-Syria normalization? And do you think that it could ever be something that is legitimized in Syria?
Does Israel want to be normal? Is it a normal state? I mean, they have normalized the relations with Egypt and Jordan. Have they shown more normality or less? Less, in my opinion. So it is not it is not about how Syria or any Syrian government deal with it. It is Israel don't want to be a normal state. It is a colonial and imperialist. Not only colonial, I agree. In my work, I talked about this issue. But there is something extremely aggressive and discriminatory in the very constitution of this politico-theological entity. So I don't think it will be normal. Besides, not a single Israeli government expressed its willingness to withdraw from Golan Heights occupied since 1967. And now they expanded it. They occupied hundreds of square kilometers of Syrian territory, and they destroyed the military capacities of Syria. And the very first day after the fall of the regime, it is a letter that will humiliate you, and you have to accept it, to condition the new team in power. So if we are honest in using this expression normal, I don't think that it is possible unless we see a real change in the very constitution of Israel. It is not only about, for Syria it is occupation of Golan Heights and targeting Syria almost on daily basis and intervening in the Syrian, but also the rights of the Palestinians. In Syria, before the uprising, we had 600,000 Palestinian refugees.
Wow.
And this is one source of the struggle. Syrians, we and Palestinians speak the same language, we have the same cuisine, our music is the same, and we feel real brotherhood. So, normal? No, this cannot be achieved unless a minimal measure of justice is achieved for the Palestinian people. If you ask me, I am only a writer, I am not a politician. For the Syrian government, they are just trying to avoid more occupation and expansion from the Israeli side. But people in the West, politicians, journalists, intellectuals, need to know that normal relations should be based. Peace cannot be achieved without justice. It was true, it is true now, and it will be true always. Without real justice, there will not be real peace in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And you're the Druze population in Syria. Israel has publicly stated that there is a genocide that's being committed against the Druze, and there seems to be a narrative at play in Israel's foreign policy that, they need to play the role of savior, which is also justifying them encroaching Syrian territory. And there's a real question now of who to trust, I can imagine, on the ground in Syria at the moment. Aside from Israel, the emergence of Islamist militias and...
Allow me to interrupt you, Zara. I want to say something about
Sure.
Sweden and Druze community. There were genocidal massacres, that's true, at the hands of the forces of the new government. The word genocide many have said that it is over politicized, but I think it is legitimate to talk about genocidal massacres in the meaning that many people were killed because they were Jews, not because they did anything. But allow me, Israel is the last power in the whole world to talk about genocide. They were at that time perpetrating a far more brutal genocide against the Palestinian people, starving them, and they are just instrumentalizing in a very opportunistic and cheap way, and colonial way, the struggle that stupidly the Syrian new government was dragged into, or dragged itself into it. Yeah, so let's separate these different phases. Genocidal massacres is true, but Israel was at that time, and still, by the way, is perpetrating genocide in Gaza and starving its people. So this is just a very opportunistic and dishonest. It is a justification for intervention.
And both can be true at the same time.
Yeah,
the massacres in Syria
this is what I wanted to say.
are true. People have been killed because they are simply Jews, men and young boys specifically, in the reports that have come out recently. And then that brings us to the question of political trust, right? You have people who are Syrian nationals that are relying on the transitional government at the moment to do something to make them feel like they are protected and they are recognized and they are not in danger of their own government, right? So do you think that there is potential for building that trust at the moment from minorities that have not only experienced the worst under the Assad regime, but also, unfortunately, under HTS, while they may deny, being responsible for the massacres that have taken place since he has taken power, what's it going to take? What conditions will be needed for the country, for minorities to feel like they can come together?
So already we've seen two blows on the face of Syrian nationalism. The basis for bringing different Syrians from different backgrounds together is Syrian nationalism, as Syrian citizens. And there were two big blows against Syrian nationalism in March against the Alawite community and in July against the Druze community. These have been very traumatizing experiences for these communities and founding experiences for them. And they will not be forgotten in years or in decades or maybe in centuries. But they should be thought of founding experiences for the Syrian nationalism. So the first thing to do, I think I expressed a similar thing several times now, on the short term, there should be an apology from the center of power now, Ahmed Shah in person, to apologize of the massacres and to pledge reparation and to bring to justice the perpetrators. The problem is that the new government was not enthusiastic about the transitional justice dossier in the country. So now they feel to hold people closer to them accountable of the newest crimes while not doing something serious about the old crimes of the Assad is a bit awkward. But in the news, only yesterday started the legal process against some of the perpetrators in the coastal area. I think this is, if done honestly, this is a positive step, but it should be part of a bigger effort for national reconciliation. Apology, reparations, bringing to justice the perpetrators, and of course stabilizing the areas, having real talks with the people and with those who represent the population in these areas and other areas, and developing a more inclusive political system in the country.
So looking forward, do you think that a post-conflict Syria, a stable Syria, can overcome sectarian divides from where you stand today?
Yes, now we have a sectarian, another phase of sectarianism. The ones in power are mostly, actually almost exclusively Sunnis. The main dynamic, political dynamic taking place in the country is concentration of power in the hands of Sunnis. So, what's sectarianism? This is sectarianism. Sectarianism is to discriminate between people according to their confessional or denominational backgrounds. And this is happening now. Our struggle for democracy in Syria and for citizenship has been always not only against dictatorship, against abstract dictatorship. It was against this combination of dictatorship and sectarianism. And it is still the case. It is still the case. As someone who has been involved in this struggle for most of my life, I do believe that this is possible. Of course I do. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It is representative government. It is finding political solution to the social problems. It is having open debate and free debate. It is public liberties. It is that people can protest peacefully. And this way we can move forward. Look, in the past we had solutions actually for the sectarian problem. It is political parties and it is active civil society. I was a member in a communist party. In the Communist Party, you find Arabs and Kurds. You find Muslims and Christians. You find Sunnis, Alawites, Druze, Ismailis. When you destroy the political parties, what are you doing? You are pushing people back to their sects, to their communities. So we need political parties. We need active civil society of youth, of writers, of women, of human rights activists, of these things that bring people together, and this helps them to abandon or to free themselves from the shackles of their communitarian moves.
I think that's very well said. I think what would heal Syrian society is to make people feel like they are safe
and they own the country.
Yes, exactly, and that they have a say, and that they are not in danger anymore to be Druze or to be Sunni or to be a Kurd, but to have an opinion and to be able to raise it and have the chance to shape the future of Syria.
And I believe actually if we have this, if we move in this direction, I believe that most of the people, the majority of the Kurds, the Druze, the Alawites, will choose Syria over any other alternatives. But when there are massacres and people are targeted because because identitarian reason, of course many will think maybe we have to just live alone separately from this slaughterhouse. So the massacre and the division goes together. The absence of massacre and the unity goes together as well. So we have to opt for respecting human dignity and human life, and I believe that most Syrians will choose Syria against any other alternative.
I hope so too. You kind of answered my final question already, and that was, after everything that Syria has endured, its people, what still gives you hope? Where do you see the seeds of a different future? And do you think that they're being planted now? Do you think now is the time? Do you see that there is potential for a different reality than you've experienced?
There's potential. Actually, many people, because of their role in the revolution and the struggle, they feel quite legitimate to harshly criticize the new government. So they don't have inferiority complex. They were involved in the struggle, they paid heavily, and they are so many women and men. So I see a potential here. The challenges are very big. The legacy of the past is enormous. But I believe that we have a potential to move forward. And it is, the Syrian revolution was called the revolution of dignity. So the priority is for human dignity and for human life. And we are still there struggling for them. And many of those who are involved in the struggle are young, not rather old like myself. So yes, I see hopes for the future. Yeah, I see hope in this active younger generation.
Yassin, thank you so much for your insight, your honesty, and your many decades of work to raise awareness on the plight of Syrians and what they've experienced through it all. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this podcast episode. For more analysis and conversation on the Middle East, more specifically Syria, please follow the Middle East Center at the New Lines Institute. I'm Zara, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.